Hey leader, and welcome to another episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast, where we are obsessed with helping you grow to your maximum potential and to maximize the impact of your leadership. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host, and in today's episode, you're going to be hearing me be interviewed by my friends Antonino Febrero and Jaden Johnson on their podcast, which is called the Boss Juice Podcast. What a name. If you aren't subscribed to it already, please do. Again, that's the Boss Juice Podcast. And in our conversation, you're going to hear me talk a lot about leadership, about homelessness, about generosity, entrepreneurship, and so much more. I think it's going to add a ton of value to your life. So enjoy the episode, and I'll be back afterwards.
Welcome back to our third installment of the Lunch Break series of the Boss Juice Podcast. With us today, we have Doug Smith of the L3 Leadership Podcast, here to talk about his story, entrepreneurship, and the Pittsburgh community in general. Doug, thanks for coming on. To get started, tell us a little bit about your background, about the L3 Leadership Podcast, and how you got kind of started into podcasting.
Yeah, honored to be here, the Boss Juice Podcast.
Yes.
I've seen you guys on my social for a while, so I was honored to get the invite. Specifically about the podcast, how I got into it. And we can go into my story later, but I had a really hard childhood. People would not anticipate the life that I'm living now if they would have seen the life that I had to live when I was a teenager. But when I was around 18 years old, I had my life turned around. I had lost my mom. She passed away when I was a senior in high school. And my whole life turned around at that point. And I had two men who were leaders that came into my life. One was who would be one day my future father-in-law. And the other was a youth pastor named Larry Betancourt. And I started interning at this church, and Larry would bring in leaders from the community. So, before there was podcasting, we'd have in-person events like this. And so someone would speak and he'd say, hey, if you really connected with this leader, you should ask them out to coffee. And he gave us this whole process for getting mentors and what to do during a meeting, what to do after a meeting. And so I started doing that, and I would invite leaders out to coffee every single month. And after about 10 years, literally, of doing that, all of my peers started saying, like, wow, Doug, you get to spend time with all these cool leaders. I wish I could. And, I always laugh. I just thought, like, have you ever asked?
Yeah.
Because 99% of the reason you probably haven't met with them is because you haven't asked. And so, but I saw that as an opportunity, and I thought, this was before podcasting was really big. I just thought, hey, what if I start recording my conversations with leaders so it's not just selfish and benefiting me, but benefiting anyone that would listen? And so my wife bought me literally a $50 recorder off of Amazon. I know nothing about equipment, and my first interview was my father-in-law. And so I threw a small recorder in between us on a couch in his living room, and that was the beginning of, now we're 400 plus episodes in and been doing this for 12 years.
That's awesome. What year was that when you first started?
2012.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're an OG. You're a podcast OG.
Podcasting before it was cool is what I tell people.
Yeah.
But now the competition is fierce.
Oh, my goodness. My goodness, yes.
Yeah.
But that's a cool story. That's a really cool story. And you started off, it was just audio? No mic, no video camera, just the recorder?
Yeah, just audio. I didn't had video for a long time, probably until like 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Awesome.
I could probably learn from you guys.
Yeah.
So.
Dylan's
I need
great.
some boss juice.
Yeah, some boss.
But actually, I'm going to throw your question back at you that you asked us before this. Who was your favorite interview?
Yeah, for me, and again, it's like, I'm sure it's the same for you guys. It's like picking your favorite child. Yeah. I'd probably say Clint Hurdle. He was the former manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I had seen him speak at a few events, and just a phenomenal human being. But he was the first really big interview that I had, or at least that felt big to me, a professional sports coach, and he was a larger-than-life personality. And how I got it was I had a friend that's friends with him, and we were at a fundraiser, and he's like, oh, I'll introduce you, I'll set you up, I'll throw you a softball. And basically he just said, hey, Clint, this is my friend Doug. And he just total silence. I'm like, how am I going to turn this into a podcast interview? And I just said, I admire you. And I just asked him, and man, he's such a servant, leader-minded guy, and he just said yes. And so I still remember shaking walking into PNC Park and into his office, but within 5 minutes, he makes you feel so comfortable. And from then on, we've been great friends since, and he lives in Florida now, and definitely one of my favorites.
That's awesome.
One of the things that I think our shows parallel is we interview leaders. We focus more so on entrepreneurs, but we interview leaders. Entrepreneurs are leaders. And you've interviewed a lot of interesting leaders. And one of the things that we've noticed on our show is that we've noticed that when we ask certain questions, there's a common characteristic or common answer that a lot of guests give. From your interviews with your guests, what would you say is a common characteristic that they portray or they talk about on your show?
Yeah, I think one thing, and we were kind of talking about this before we started recording, is people's lives aren't perfect. There's their lives are hard. We were just talking about Clint Hurdle, and Clint's very open with this, and he would share it on he shared it on my podcast. Like, he went through, he got divorced twice. He was an alcoholic for a while. You know, if we go into my story, you'll hear my background. And I think sometimes when we see leaders or people we admire, you know, we see the social media highlights or see them in a newspaper on ESPN, and we think, oh, if I could be Clint Hurdle, my life would be perfect. But the reality is, man, we all go through suffering. We all fail more often than we succeed. And I think that's been what's been so humbling about it, is when you actually get to know them, it's like, wow, these are just real people who are just like you and me. And it really encourages me and gives me courage to go out and make my own risks, because I recognize that there's no path that's just straight up and to the right. It's tough, and I'm going to hit times where I want to give up and throw in the towel, but that's why I need community around me.
Yes. It seems like those people, the characteristic is they were the best at dealing with the adversity. They were able to continue and push forward harder than the other people, because it's like indefinite that you're going to do that or have to deal with that.
Yeah, never give up.
Yeah, never give up. I like that. And so in interviewing these guests, and you see them, they talk about their adversity and their hardships, is there something, do you think that, and you had mentioned community, do you think that it is their community or the people in their life that helps them succeed? I know you had talked a little bit about how your father-in-law played a big role, or do you think that people can take their own accountability and kind of turn their life around?
Yeah, for me, so at L3 Leadership, one of our core values is community. And we always say that no leader should ever do life alone, but in community. And are there people that can charge pretty hard and go pretty far and be pretty successful on their own? Yes. But what I found, I actually had a leader tell me when I was in my 20s, he said, Doug, I think only about 2% of leaders make it to their finish line, truly realizing all of their potential and doing everything they were supposed to do. And a lot of times it's just because they didn't have community around them, that when things got tough. So for me, one of the reasons we do mastermind groups is we believe every leader needs to be three things: fully known, fully loved, and fully challenged. So what that means is you need a place and a group of people around you that you're fully known, that you can come to and share anything with. And when I mean anything, anything. You could be going through the hardest thing ever, but you can share that because, number two, you're fully loved. And so I have a group I'm leading now, and we had a national leader who mentors me come in and pour into our guys. He said, guys, if you're struggling with something, you don't have to tell everybody, but you have to tell somebody. And he said, the people you need to tell are the people in this room. And it's because they couldn't care less what you're going through or struggling with, but it's because they couldn't care more. And so we need that. But then not only do we need to be fully known and fully loved, we also need fully challenged. You know, I often joke that my personality, I'm a words of affirmation guy in the love languages, like just pat me on the back, tell me I'm awesome, and I could charge back out there. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I don't need a hug and a high five. Sometimes I need a slap in the face. And that's the fully challenged part. And we all need challenge at time with the truth of, hey, you're better than that, or hey, you need to do that. And we need truth. And so fully known, loved, and challenged is absolutely essential for anyone in leadership.
Yes.
At Endosha, we help transform visions into results. What does that mean? We often work with companies who are doing amazing things that have incredible products and services, but fail to communicate what they do properly and market themselves effectively. We passionately serve entrepreneurs, business leaders, and visionaries to see what's in their heart and their visions for the future come to life. We do that by providing fractional marketing leadership and creative execution all in one. That's what we call VCMO. With VCMO, you get a marketing director and a team of creative professionals to help execute all of your marketing needs, all for one monthly cost. How do we do all this? We do it three ways. Number one, we get your vision. We get excited about your mission and your trajectory as a company and come alongside to see you go further, faster. Two, we have a team of talented strategists and creatives to get all of the work done. And three, we flat out work freaking hard for you and your company. Reach out today. Let's start a conversation.
In a previous episode, we interviewed Jeff Hancher.
Yeah.
And he's big on leadership too, has this whole leadership, class and master class and stuff like that. He had mentioned, one of the qualities of a leader is kind of having accountability and responsibility, but reflecting. So if, your team kind of points out something's wrong, addressing like, hey, maybe you're right. Do you see that quality or characteristic in leaders that you've interviewed?
Yes. Teachability is everything. In fact, the mentor I was talking about wrote a book called The Key to Everything, and the key to everything is teachability. This is absolutely huge. I shared on Fridays, Clint Hurdle actually got me doing this. I started sharing failures in my life. So we call it Friday Fails. And one thing that we do on my team at Light of Life is we have quarterly retreats. We get off site and we spend a large part of the morning planning and things like that, but then we spend the afternoon actually identifying, discussing, and solving issues. Well, one question that I always ask, no matter what in those settings, is there anything causing division, disunity, or distrust on our team? Is there anything causing disunity, division, or distrust? Because if there is, we're never going to be successful as a team. And so the one time I asked this, it was actually one of our team members. It was her very first day. So this is her first experience. I asked that question, and one of our marketing team members said, you, Doug, you are causing division, disunity, and distrust. And it's like, and this is in front of the whole team. It's not like, hey, this is a one-on-one. So it's like, what do you do with that? Well, one, I could get defensive and say, that's so stupid. I am not. I'm a great leader. Or I can say, okay, hey, lean in and lead with curiosity. Like, tell me more. Help me understand. What is it about the way that I'm leading? And then she ended up being very specific of saying, hey, the way you communicate, getting certain things done is very, very frustrating to us. And if you just did X, Y, Z, that would be a lot more helpful. And so I was able to make a shift in my leadership and become a better leader because, one, we created a safe culture where people could actually speak up and speak the truth and give that feedback without having any punishment. And, I want to encourage the leaders when we talk about teachability. There's a leader called Andy Stanley, and he has this great quote. He said, when people give you feedback, if you don't listen to them, you'll soon be surrounded by people who have nothing to say because people realize that you're not going to actually receive the feedback. And so I think being humble and teachable is one of the greatest skills that we can ever develop in our lives.
Can we get a sneak peek into this Friday's failure of the week? What'd you call it?
The Friday fail?
Friday fail.
What was I going to do this week? I did have this planned. You may have to edit this.
And if not, if you remember something, just like a
I
top tier failure.
Yes. No, just recently. It's actually on the same subject as teachability.
Okay.
In the past 3 weeks, I've had 3 separate meetings where I was in a meeting with an individual, and all 3 of them pointed out to me that I was getting really defensive and energetic about what they were telling me.
Yeah.
And I didn't even notice it. Like I was actually a blind spot. I'm like, me defensive? I don't get that. I'm Mr. Teachable. No, but it's like, okay, 3 specific people said that. And so for me, it's just recognizing like, okay, what is causing that failure for me to get defensive? Do I have too much on my plate? Am I too passionate about something? And so I really had to dissect that and get back to those people, apologize, own it, and say, please continue to call that out in me when you see it. Because again, that's the only way I think we get better is when we get coached.
That's awesome. Absolutely. So you had mentioned Light of Life. Can you explain what you do there?
Yeah, so Light of Life, for those listening here in Pittsburgh, we're a nonprofit on the north side of Pittsburgh. Have been there for over 70 years, serving the men, women, and children of our city who are experiencing homelessness. And so what we do is we have a continuum of care, and what we mean by that is no matter where someone is in their journey of experiencing homelessness, we want to have a next step for them. So we have a street outreach team that'll go out to those encampments and sitting out on the street, and we'll build relationships with them in hopes that they'll come in for a night of shelter or a meal. We have an emergency shelter with up to 75 beds for men, women, and children that can stay there every night, and they'll get a warm bed, a hot meal, and a shower. And then we have long-term programming as well. And so we have men and women who can live with us anywhere from 9 months to 2 years. And we help them with their recovery if addiction is part of their journey. We help them get an education and find employment. We help them have housing, and then ultimately, relaunch them into society, hopefully better than when they walk through our doors. And so it's a great honor to be there. I've been there for 14 years, and I'm currently serving as the assistant executive director. So basically overseeing the day-to-day operations of the organization. And I've been in that role for about 2 years.
You mentioned that you help these people kind of recover, find housing, and then get employment. Mm-hmm. How could businesses in Pittsburgh or entrepreneurs in Pittsburgh help you guys or help the less fortunate people get more involved in the business community?
Yeah, specifically on the employment end, and I know this depends on what your business is, but hiring the men and women that we serve. A lot of these men and women, we're in a position where they're undesirable for the workplace, and so we're so blessed to have partners with businesses that'll say, "Hey, we'd love to give someone a second chance," and we see that happen. There's one guy that's coming to mind that one of my coworkers got him a job at BNY Mellon over 10 years ago now, and he's still there, and he's loved, and it's just an amazing thing. And so you can make a huge difference. And I think sometimes as employers, it's like, well, what's their skill level? Like, you'd be surprised how skilled the men and women who walk through our doors are. We talk about education, sometimes we have to teach people how to read and get a GED, but other times, literally, we're just trying to help people who literally have master's or doctorate degrees, but because of some of their choices, found themselves in our doorstep, and we're able to help them find it. So I would say employing people, one, and then two, on the ways to get involved. Volunteering is always huge, so you can always come down. That's how I'd encourage you to start your relationship with Light of Life. Come down and serve a meal. See what it's like. Interact. Get to know some of the men and women. Get to know their story. Don't just scoop them food, say, hey, how are you? What's your story? And listen to them. And I think, most people come to Light of Life volunteering thinking that they're going to change lives. But what they end up finding is their life is the one that ends up getting transformed. Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing. Yeah. And then I'm in fundraising, so I'd be remiss not to say, hey, you can support us financially as well. We're funded primarily through individuals, businesses, churches in the region. And so without them, we wouldn't be able to do the work that we've been doing for 70 years.
It's such an issue that's occurring right now in our country, and it's a topic. We hear it politicized constantly, but really it annoys me when you're dealing with having conversations about human life and it's a political conversation. Like, it goes a layer deeper when it comes to human beings, like our brothers and sisters who really did maybe just one or two decisions. They went off the beaten path, and now they really just need another chance. So when I hear stories like this, nonprofits like this, like, it's just very uplifting to know that you guys aren't making political statements. You're literally looking at somebody for the human being that they are, and you're seeing the best in them, and you're trying to connect with them in a human level. So like, it's awesome. I love that.
And I learned this personally. And again, we can go more into my story, but I was a drug dealer in high school, into drugs. I had a younger sister, and I mentioned how my life kind of turned around because I had different people come into my life and show me another way. My sister kept going down the same path. And about a year into my time at Light of Life, she came to me. She was 5 months pregnant with my first nephew. And she just said, Doug, I need help. And I said, well, what do you mean you need help? And she said, I'm a heroin addict. And I had no idea. I had done drugs, but never gotten heroin, and had no idea what to do. So I reached out to our program director at Light of Life. And for 9 years, Light of Life walked me, my family, and my sister through my sister's addiction. She ended up homeless twice in that 9-year period, had 2 kids, was in our program 3 different times. The third time she was in our program, she was clean for 18 months. It was beautiful. I felt like I had my sister back. We're a faith-based organization too, and so she rededicated her life to Christ and became a person of faith. So that was really important to me. But unfortunately, after those 18 months, she ended up relapsing for the upteenth time, and she overdosed and passed away in December of 2019. And I always share that story, going back to the human side. If you would have ever asked me personally if I would have ever known someone in need of Light of Life services, let alone it being a family member, I would have never believed you. But what I've come to learn through my sister's story and through getting to know men and women in our program for the past 14 years is everybody is somebody's sister, everybody is somebody's brother, somebody's son, somebody's daughter, somebody's mother, and somebody's father. And when you see it that way, it really does change everything. When I show up to work every day, I show up because as long as someone's breathing, there's hope. And so I see my sister walking through the doors. And again, on the faith side, I don't mean to get too heavy on the spiritual side, but for me, knowing, even though I didn't get the natural win I wanted with my sister, I believe I'll see my sister again because of Light of Life services. And the reality is also the work we do is extremely dark. Like we say that we stand on the gates of hell, like it's life or death. There's people that will walk through our doors today, and if they have a good experience, it could be the first step to their transformation. And if they leave and have a bad experience, we may never see them again, and tonight could be their last night. And so the work we do is so serious. But you said, I love what you said. It's all about seeing the individual. And that's why I encourage you guys, when you come down, get to know people's story. Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, he often said that there isn't a person that you couldn't learn to love if you just knew their story. And I think there's so many preconceived notions about why people are homeless, and we can get into that if you want to. But it's a very complex issue, and many people are 1 or 2 decisions or paychecks away. They're way closer to homelessness than they think. Yeah. And so I think we all need to keep that at heart with the issue.
In a previous episode, we interviewed Benny Fisher, and he had said that his company is the company of second chances, but he said America is the country of second chances. And it sounds like you guys at Light of Life do a good job of giving people that second chance at life, at work, whatever it may be. Do you think that the Pittsburgh community, does a good enough job at supporting second chances and helping people get back onto their feet?
Yeah, I think in general, I think we all want to. I mean, I think, and I would say I would add to the second chance, third chance, fourth chance, fifth chance. Hey, and me too, right? It's not just people walking through the doors of Light of Life. I need 5 chances, 6 chances, 7 chances. We all mess up. But I think that's our heart as Pittsburghers. We want to help. We want to cheer for the underdog. We want someone to rise up out of the ashes, so to speak. Where I would say we've grown, or I see growth in Pittsburgh, and the mayor often says this. He said, man, Pittsburgh was one of the most isolated cities in the world. And what he means by that is, there's a million nonprofits, but none of them talk to each other. There's a million organizations trying to help, but none of them talk to each other. And so what I have seen since COVID is a lot of organizations, and I'm specifically thinking in the realm of homelessness at least, these organizations, along with the city, the county, Light of Life, are all coming together and saying, listen, we may all have different philosophies on what to do about this issue, but we all want the same thing. We all want to see people's lives transformed. We don't want to see people out on the street. And so we want to help people. And so that's been a beautiful thing, and I hope that continues, and I hope that makes us even better at giving second, third, fourth chances.
Sure.
Wow. That's encouraging to hear. I'm happy that to hear that Pittsburgh, because one thing that we did in the last lunch break special is we do try to, break down previous episodes that have come on and kind of interconnect for the audience who've watched multiple episodes.
Sure.
And also look at these larger topics specifically in our city, because we're Pittsburghers. We have vision for the city and we want certain outcomes to be there. So to hear that in the nonprofit sector that you guys are improving your communication tenfold, that's super encouraging when we talk about like the tech scene, for example, like much less important, but also if you see more of a community being built, that's when amazing things happen, when everyone comes together.
That's an interesting topic though, too. Kind of, we can maybe get into a discussion on that. So one of the things we discussed on our previous lunch break series was how Pittsburgh, frames itself in the entrepreneurial nature of it's a tech company. It's going to be the next Silicon Valley. It's going to be the next Hollywood, yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. But it's like lacking certain things where like the money isn't here. It seems like if you have a health startup, you're off to the races. But tech, AI, things that are more risky, like the culture here we've discussed in the past is different in that the city might not be willing to take a risk on something that might not see a return for 5 years. And that's just, and we talked about it, like maybe it's the culture here.
Conservative.
Right. Yeah. Do you feel that the culture around nonprofits in the city is like that? Or are people more closed-minded into, helping fundraise, or what's been the experience around that?
Yeah, not at all for me, at least a Light of Life. And again, I know I forget how many nonprofits are in Pittsburgh. There's plenty.
Yeah.
But my experience, at least the Light of Life, has been people are overly generous. Organizations are overly generous. Foundations are overly generous. Because I think everyone wants to help. And so that's been my experience overall. Again, I can't speak for all nonprofits. I would also say, at Light of Life, we're dealing with a major issue that's front and center of everyone. And I think everyone's heart, same thing with the food bank, like in general, like basic human needs, those are the areas that people usually care about the most. So often, even when there's pandemics or issues going on in our economy, we're usually the last to feel it, because everyone has a heart that, hey, no matter how bad things are, we want to make sure that no one goes without. And that's one of the beautiful things about what we do. And I think the nonprofit community here in Pittsburgh.
That's amazing. That makes me proud. I root for Pittsburgh. We were talking about sports earlier. We're rooting for the professional teams. We're rooting for the tech scene. But to hear that, at least as of right now, the overall vision for Pittsburgh and the nonprofit scene is looking very positive. Like, that's amazing. I love to hear that.
And let's dive into a little bit more about leadership. Sure. And I want to talk more now about your journey of becoming a leader. So you had briefly mentioned, you had some run-in with drugs and whatnot. Can you just open up a little bit about your story? Because I think that it's important for listeners to understand that leaders are not perfect. We might have a shaky past, but it's about how we overcome and build ourselves up to a better version of ourselves. Can you just share a little bit more about your story?
Yeah. Growing up, I grew up in Wexford, North Allegheny School District, had a pretty normal family life until middle school. In middle school, two things happened to me. One was my mom got diagnosed with a rare nerve disease. So it wasn't MS, but she basically she had pins and needles in her legs and feet 24 hours a day, ended up in a wheelchair, ultimately ended up in bed most of her life. And so that changed a lot. My dad had to work 2 jobs, and my dad's a bus driver for our school district. And at the time, he was driving trucks on the weekend to get our family by. So my dad, I went from always being around to basically being able to do whatever I want as a 13-year-old, which when you're 13 is awesome. No one wants boundaries, but it wasn't awesome for me long term. And then I also went to a faith-based camp over one summer, and that's when I became a person of faith. And so I actually wanted to be a pastor when I was in middle school. But because I had no boundaries, in the middle of 8th grade to 9th grade, I was in the woods and tried drugs for the first time with my friends and never looked back. Fell totally away from the whole church thing, never wanted anything to do with that again. Found out that my mom had these pills called Oxycontins that I could sell, which is basically synthetic heroin. And so I sold that in our high school. I did all kind of drugs and just basically partied. Barely, I had to go to summer school every single year just to get to the next grade. But that all changed, and if you would have ever said anything to me like I'm a leader. In fact, I remember my senior year of high school, me and my buddy got called to the office for the upteenth time. And the vice principal, Walt Zeminski, who I still am friends with today, he looked at us and said, "Guys, I'm so sick of seeing you here. You guys are leaders, and people follow you. And you can either use that influence for good or use it for bad. And right now, you're using it all for bad. I encourage you to do otherwise." And we walked out of the room, and we just laughed. We're like, "Can you believe that guy thinks we're leaders?" Funniest thing ever.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward later that year, in my senior year, my mom ended up passing away. And person of faith, the only thing that bothered me when my mom died is I didn't know if she had a relationship with Christ. And I didn't know why that bothered me because I didn't care about God at the time.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. But I'm tormented by that. I'm getting drunk and high every night. And that thought's just hitting me like, you're never going to know. And 3 months after my mom passed, I get this call from a relative I don't even have a relationship with. And she just said, "Doug, I really felt like God put you on my heart this morning and wanted me to call you and let you know that I was a nurse in the hospital with your mom. And I led your mom into a relationship with Christ. And I think God wants you to know that." And so for me,
that's crazy.
Man, my knees hit the floor. I opened my arms. I started crying. I said, "God, whatever you want for the rest of my life, I'm yours." 2 weeks later, I put in quotes, randomly got invited to a Bible study that was led by a mom in our high school. 150 kids would go to this every week. Wow. And I saw this beautiful girl sitting on the couch. I'm like, I think I could show up here every week. Left, and I said, "Fellas," I told my high school friends, "I met the girl I'm going to marry," which, spoiler alert, I did. And her mom was the one that led the study. And she said, I said that to my friend. She said to her mom, "I can't believe Doug came to Bible study tonight. He's one of the most influential kids in our school, but he uses all of his influence for partying and drugs. Like, if he ever got intentional with his life and followed God, like, I think he could change the world." And this is really the start of the leadership journey. Like, for whatever reason, that mom who was married to who would be my father-in-law, who was the dean of admission at Carnegie Mellon for 45 years.
Oh, wow.
A little intimidating.
No, but that's pretty cool. That's a good father-in-law.
Yes. But he came into my life and he became a father figure. And, I was telling someone my story the other day, a friend from high school who knew me, and he said, how many kids do you feel like that are in the situation that you were in actually get out? And I'm an optimist by nature, as you could probably tell. Mm-hmm. And I said, "I bet 50%. And he goes, "I think it's more like 5%. Wow. And man, my heart just shattered. But what I've learned in my experience is the number one way, and again, as a faith-based person, God was the number one way out. Mm-hmm. But in the natural world, the number one way out was having people show me another way of life. It was having my father-in-law, dean of admission, say, "You're a leader. You have potential. You should go to college," because I barely graduated high school. "You need to go to college. You can do great things. You can change the world." They brought me to a church where I met the youth pastor I mentioned. He was the second father figure in my life. And these two men showed me a different way of life and actually gave me a vision of myself as a leader and someone who could actually do something with your life. When I say I had no ambition, I was the laziest kid. I used to make my parents, I wouldn't even take my dishes from one room to another. I just leave them there for my dad to clean up. And so for me to turn my life around from there to where I am today is unbelievable, but it's really because of the people that came alongside me and showed me that I had potential to be a leader.
Amazing. In the world of social media, this is the real blessing in the world that we live in today. People that have podcasts is that, yes, with social media now, everyone is so interconnected. This is the information age. And we thankfully can be that type of mentor, at least a first stage of that with the youth, just by making content and putting it on our phones. So it's, to go to God, I really believe it's a blessing. It can be a curse as well, but if we use our platform for good, we could be that first step for somebody who's in that position, to get out of it, or at least think that it's possible, just hearing a story like this. So we are living in interesting times, and that's incredible, man.
Yeah.
That's so incredible.
Well, and everything I do today, I do for that very reason. Yeah. Every podcast I write, every social media post I put out there, anything that I put, it's because, man, if this impacts one person and they get a similar message that I got and helps them turn around their life, man, I'll do that every day for the rest of my life because it's possible. 100%. People, like, my story is living. I don't care where you are, how bad your journey is right now, how old you are, you can have an amazing life if you'll just start to live intentionally and get around the right people.
Going off that topic, have you ever gotten feedback from someone that listened to your podcast or read one of your posts and said, "Hey, you changed my life"?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. I feel like I get that all the time. One that comes to mind, I used to have a blog. That's how I basically started before podcasting. And again, this is more on the faith side of things. Again, I don't know your audience, but I actually wrote like how to have a relationship with God on my about page. And this girl who I didn't even know like calls me out of nowhere, and she's like, "Hey, I just want you to know that I literally just printed out your entire About Me page, and I gave my life to God, and I think I'm supposed to tell you that." I'm like, and now she's a leader in her community, making a huge impact. I've had people come up to me and say, "Hey, I was at the darkest point." I remember I was working at a bank when I started writing, and this kid came up to me who I didn't even know, and he said, "Hey, I just want you to know I was in the darkest season of my life, and your posts on a daily basis are the only thing that got me by. Thank you so much for doing that." And so people can criticize creators all they want of like, "Oh, are you just doing the podcast for you? Or you just want like," no, I believe I can impact lives, and I've seen that. And it becomes addicting. Like I am addicted to helping transform lives because there's nothing more fulfilling. Money won't fulfill you that way. Big house won't fulfill you that way. There's nothing like knowing that you had a positive impact in the life of another.
So me and my family, the holiday season are coming up, and we have a tradition every year right before Christmas. We watch It's a Wonderful Life together.
Yes.
And I mean, that's the basis of that entire story, is that he thought that he had missed out because he hadn't got all of the material wealth, but then he realized that his life was completely fulfilled because all he had done his whole life was serve. So it's an amazing
Dude,
story.
I cry every year. I'll
every
try not to cry.
single
Man, when he opens the book and the angel, what's the angel's name? Clarence.
Yep.
And it's like, man, he is no failure who has friends.
Yes.
Oh,
That hits us
come
every
on.
year. There's usually like 20 people in my parents' living room, and we're losing it a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's an interesting topic though, because I want to tie in your faith. So I'm Catholic. I was raised Catholic. I'm a practicing Catholic. Whether I go to church every Sunday is a different story, but
Yeah.
you know, Jesus and I are tight.
Okay. All right.
You know,
Good.
but I think that as a Catholic and, you know, being strong in my faith and being an entrepreneur, there's this question that always comes in my mind around, you know, greed. And, you know, because Jesus' teachings are a lot about, you know, kind of helping the poor, you know, don't be greedy, you know, be selfless. And I feel like the business world, the entrepreneurial world is more, you know, all about how much can we take in and how much profit can we make. Do you think that, you know, there's a way that, you know, faith can be served in business?
Oh, for sure. I mean, when it comes to greed, and I forget, I'm not going to remember the actual statistic, but Jesus talks more about greed a lot more than he talks about a lot of the stuff that we bicker about and judge other people for.
Crazy.
No one ever looks within themselves and say, am I, like, no one ever reads that scripture where Jesus calls people out on greed and thinks, oh, that's me. But man, how many times in scripture does it say like, man, here's a warning to those who are rich? On the generosity front, so one in Christianity, so at least from my journey, tithing is a part of that. And so it's giving 10% of your income. We tithe off the gross to God. That I've done that since I was 17 years old. And so and we believe the tithe belongs to God. So that's not even technically giving. It's just giving back to God what is his. But even having that heart of like, hey, the first thing I do when I get paid is I give my 10% to God. Now where my wife and I have been challenged and have tried to grow in generosity is every year we just pray about, God, how do you want us to give this year? And we try to increase that percentage of our income. And some years we've been able to do a lot more. Some days we've had to scale back. We do have 5 kids or a 5th kid on the way, which is crazy. Wow. But the model, or what inspired me, Rick Warren, who is a pastor in California, Purpose-Driven Life, best-selling book of all time outside of the Bible. Sure. He has a TED Talk that's phenomenal. And when he wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, he said he became very, very wealthy, right? Obviously, if you have the second best-selling book of all time. And he said, I didn't buy a new car. I didn't buy a new house. What he did do, which I love, is he now reverse tithes. He gives 90% of his income away, and he lives off 10%. And he paid back the church every single penny and dollar that the church ever paid him, because it was never about money for him. And for me, that's kind of been the motto of like, hey, I don't know if we'd ever get to 90%. That would be pretty cool. Yeah. But what if we thought more about how much we can give than how much we could save and invest every year, and make a difference through our giving? I think that could go a long way in helping people. But overall, I would say entrepreneurship and faith, like you guys are making the world, the best way I've heard faith work integration is no matter what you're doing, if you're making a widget, et cetera, ultimately you're making the world more of the way it ought to be in the kingdom of God. And so there's great work. You know, a lot of times people say to me, oh, I don't work at Light of Life. Like the work you do is so noble, but the work you do as a software creator is just as noble. Like you're creating something that is making millions of people's lives better. And again, you might be on the coding end of that thinking, what does my coding have to do with this? But on the other end of the user, it's like, hey, how many apps am I grateful for that I use every day, that there's hundreds and thousands of people that made these things possible.
100%.
And I think when you find your purpose in that, it's a lot more fulfilling and not being like, oh, I don't work at a nonprofit, so I must not be making a difference for God. I don't think that's true at all.
Right. One of the other interesting things I think about our society is sort of our tax code. I mean, there's tax incentives for businesses to donate to nonprofits, to charities. Do you think the government does a good enough job of incentivizing businesses to help nonprofits?
Yeah, so I'm not going to be great at all of these questions. You guys could probably answer. What I will say, and I'll challenge those, especially if people of faith, if giving to benefit from taxes is the only reason you give, then like it's really not charity at all. The real question is, hey, if you got no benefit from the government for giving, would you still give? And would you still give at the levels that you would? And I think that's the true, Jesus warned about, it's all about your heart, right? The story of the widow's mite, she gave everything she had, which was barely anything. And Jesus said she gave way more than all those entrepreneurs who had tens of millions of dollars. And they may have given hundreds of thousands of dollars, but compared to what they had and what was in their heart, they did it for the wrong reasons. And Jesus actually says, man, if you give for the wrong reason, if you were giving to impress people or to say, wow, look at me, or look what I did, that's your reward. There is no other reward. Like you did it for you. Yeah. And so generosity is all about a heart issue and how you can make an impact. So that would be my challenge to entrepreneurs listening.
To add to the point that you made earlier, I think that's the importance of community and fellowship, is that if you have people holding you accountable, they will ask you or they will see those things inside of you. It's still up to us to accept the truth and to, reflect on the reason why we're doing things. But it starts with having a bunch of people that you trust that can call you out and be like, hey man, you look like you're reaping the glory a little bit too much on that thing that you did, being on stage, or this doesn't seem genuine. So
you mentioned community. So I've been leading mastermind groups for over 10 years now, and part of what we do in mastermind groups is we share our goals with each other. And often what I found is people of faith have giving goals. And there'd be people who maybe weren't in that season of their life, or maybe weren't people of faith, and they hear about other people having generosity goals, and then they get inspired, and then they start to give. And then you can go back and forth. Like there's a guy named Dave Ramsey. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. Yeah. Dave Ramsey, one of his life goals was to give away $1 million in a day. And I think just a few years ago, he did it. Like, man, when you start getting excited about generosity and the impact you can make financially, think of how much that would drive you to bring in even more revenue for your business when you can make an even bigger difference. It's a much better motivator.
Yeah, of course, I agree.
Absolutely. I think that's important too. Speaking of Dave Ramsey, I know a little bit about his story. He's done a lot for his employees. I mean, if you listen to his story and what he's done for some of his employees, it's incredible. So when you talk about, I'm sure that guy makes a ton of money, but where his heart's at, I think he's more focused on the giving than the money. So.
Oh yeah, he's one of my heroes. I know recently, I think around every Christmas, they'll go to either Costco or the mall, and everyone gets $1,000. Every employee, and he has 1,000 employees, gets $1,000 just to go buy their family presents or whatever. It's just one example. So yeah, find heroes that are generous and have them inspire you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Amazing, absolutely. So going back onto the whole podcast realm and interviewing different leaders and starting a podcast in Pittsburgh, one of the things I want to talk about on the entrepreneurial side is I believe that podcasters are another level of entrepreneurs. It's still a risk. The barrier of entry might be low, but it's still a risk. You're still trying to create something, build a brand and a business out of this. Do you think that Pittsburgh has a good culture around podcasting
or media in general?
Or media in general?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't pay that much attention. Like, there's a few people I have my eye on. Like, you guys are on my radar now. So I think so. But at the end of the day, it's just like, hey, just create. Yeah. And when I meet podcasters, so this is totally random, but if you're meeting people that compete against you, like, hopefully that just drives you more of like, hey, I'm reading a great book now called Choose Your Enemies Wisely, which is really, really interesting. Yeah. But it's basically like, hey, how many, like, if you watch The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, like, how many times was he driven by an enemy who was another player who said, man, Jordan's not that great. I'm going to own him tonight. Mm-hmm. And what did Jordan say? Man, that's all I needed. Yeah. So, but when we actually, so I think it's great to compete against one another. But what I found is when we actually get, and again, going back to community, when we get in a room together, hey, we can compete all day out there, but man, it's a brotherhood, it's a sisterhood, it's brothers and sisters coming together and friends, right? And so 100%. I think on the community sense, yes, it's very, very good, even if we have some, hey, I need to outdo that. Man, Boss Juice is competing with me now.
But you mentioned it even with nonprofits. The nonprofit scene in Pittsburgh, you felt really grew, 2-3x because of communication between different nonprofits. I think, to answer his question, my opinion is we haven't reached our full potential in regards to the media potential that Pittsburgh has.
Yeah.
There isn't massive brands, like there's not a Joe Rogan podcast or even
Let's
something
change that.
smaller.
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
But
100%.
it starts with people coming together and just reposting each other's stuff. Like, I'm very thankful that we got to sit down with you today and hear your story. And yeah, just amazing. So, hopefully we spend 2025, helping each other out.
So is that the goal of the Boss Juice podcast, is competing with Rogan?
Yeah.
Let's go.
One day.
Maybe I always told him
I'd love
that
to
he
have him
reminds me
on.
of Lex Friedman. He's a Lex Friedman guy. I believe in him.
Let's go.
Yeah, good question asker,
I've gotten better. I will say,
Yes.
it's been a journey. Dylan, people don't know. I got to shout out Dylan for a second because he's good at what he does. He's good at critiquing and,
Yes.
he gives me good feedback. And so as you kind of mentioned, being able to take feedback and listen to what people say, so
he's blunt. He tells you the truth.
Yeah.
Even when it hurts
right.
really bad, he's our guy. That's
Right,
our guy.
I can't wait to hear the feedback on this episode. Let's go.
But Doug, I appreciate you kind of sharing your story and, things about nonprofits and your views on podcasting and leadership. Usually we ask our guests a question and it's about their word of advice for entrepreneurs. But I want to change this question today because, I do view you as an entrepreneur, as a leader, but we wanted to change, Jade and I were talking and we kind of had an idea for a different type of question. And Jade, this was your idea. So why don't you kind of hit him with our little
So
change
we do
of
one
pace
word
here.
of advice, but because of the fact that you've made such a career in media and you've been doing it for a very long time, what would be your one word of advice for podcast or brand personalities based on your experience? What's the one word of advice?
Oh man, me with one word with anything is tough.
You can make it like 20.
So
trust me.
start where you're at and get feedback and get better. Start where you're at, get feedback, get better. So start where you're at. One of the greatest things that I hear for feedback from me on a positive note is, hey, I went back and listened to the first 20 episodes of the L3 Leadership Podcast, and I am blown away by how far you've come in question asking, in quality, et cetera. And so to look back on a journey of growth of 12 years, phenomenal. Always get feedback. The times I've grown most, I ask 2 questions at the end of every podcast that I do. Number 1 is, hey, make me better. What was this experience like for you? I'm going to ask you guys the same thing when we get off this mic. What could I have done to make the experience better? How can I be better the next time I'm a guest or the next time I'm a host? A lot of times people say, oh, you're great. I've had probably 3 or 4, and I'll just give you one if it's helpful. Yeah. I remember it was same piece of advice from 2 different leaders. One of my mentors said, Doug, when I listen to you on the podcast, it sounds like you're so focused on getting to the next question that you're not actually listening to the guest. And I would come up with 3 or 4 pages of questions. So I thought, okay, I need to chew on that. Ken Coleman, who works for Dave Ramsey, he's interviewed people for a living. I brought up that feedback to him after an interview, and I'm like, hey, speak to me. He's like, well, what are you afraid of? I'm like, what do you mean, what am I afraid of? He's like, you're afraid of something. If you're so focused on going to the next question that you're afraid, you're not afraid what the audience thinks. The audience isn't here. He said, you're afraid of the person you're interviewing. You think that they're better than you. And the reality was I did. And I was so insecure about what the people sitting across from me thought of me that I didn't let my curiosity lead the interview. That feedback changed everything for me. And so I got feedback. That was number 2. Start where you are, get feedback, and then grow. Okay, I changed some things after that. I stopped caring, not completely, but I stopped caring about what my guests think. I listened. I didn't have to follow my script of 30 questions. If you guys said something and I'm interviewing you and I'm like, wow, I'm just going to follow that.
Yeah.
That was a game changer in my interview skill. So that would be my advice to people in media. Just always get better.
That is amazing, man.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Cool. Doug, thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate the time.
Yes.
Boss Juice.
Thank
Hey,
you
when
so
you're competing
much.
with Rogan, let's go.
Yeah, let's go.
go.
Absolutely. One day, Joe, we want you to come on.
Yes.
Invite me. I went in,
Yeah.
I went in the room.
That's it.
The other
Remember me
co-host.
when you're that big. Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you so much,
Thanks, Doug.
Doug.
Well, hey, leader, thank you so much for listening to my conversation with my friends from the Boss Juice podcast. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. You can check out their podcast, the Boss Juice podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts. I encourage you to check them out. I also want to thank our sponsor, Andosha Marketing Solutions. They are the producers of this podcast, and if you are looking for help with your organization's marketing, I cannot recommend them enough. I've been working with them for years. You can check them out at andosha.com. That's ANDOCIA.com. And as always, I like to end every episode with a quote, and today I'll quote Lao Tzu, who said this: "A leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves. I love that. Well, that's going to make a wrap on today's podcast. And as always, leader, remember, don't quit. Keep leading. The world desperately needs your leadership. I'll talk to you next episode.